If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Back with Animation Junkie, and something that I wanted to talk about really since I started doing this sub-series, but it's taking me a long time to get through these because I'm kind of only doing about one a month. But I want to talk about Ghost in the Shell. This was the movie that made me initially wake up and pay attention to anime as an art form, and for a very long time stood as my favorite anime film of all time. That did get supplanted eventually, but it's still right up there for me. And I'm actually gonna double dip slightly because I haven't gotten around to talking about the movie, but what's making me do this video is I have finally seen, I've been meaning to for a while, Ghost in the Shell 2.0, which was kind of a remastering of it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna talk about the movie generally, mainly just talking about its original release, and then I'll sort of have a little bit at the end talking specifically about Ghost in the Shell 2.0. So Ghost in the Shell, if you didn't already know, is a seminal 1990s cyberpunk anime film. It was highly influential on The Matrix, and if you watch it, and you've probably seen The Matrix, and you watch this movie, you can see so many of the influences on that film. And it deals with this specialized security department in a near future Japan, dealing with a team hunting a criminal known as the Puppet Master. And what he does is he hacks people's brains, because at this point in time, people at the very least have internet connection jacks in their brains, if not in fact being fully augmented humans or having an artificial brain doing all the computing inside their head. So you can actually hack a person, and he has been doing that. So Section 9 is hunting the Puppet Master. In Section 9, the field work is headed by Major Motoko Kusanagi. Now she is the hero of the film, but Section 9 as a whole makes a really good backup team. Now she is actually a fully cybernetic body. She's not a robot, she's got a human consciousness in there, but she is a completely artificial body. And she's reached a point where she started asking a lot of philosophical questions about herself, like, I have these memories and I have this belief that I have a soul, or what they refer to as a ghost, but is it real anymore? Because that's the only thing that theoretically makes me any different from just a machine. And she's asking these questions about herself while she's helping track down this criminal, the Puppet Master, and just sort of the meeting of this existential crisis with the sorts of crimes that she's tracking him down for. It all builds very well. Now, I'm talking the headier concepts here initially because they are very much front and center. Characters actually stop and talk about some of the philosophical implications of what is going on, but this is also an anime action movie, and the action is phenomenal. It's brutal, really. There's some really hard-hitting fights, hand-to-hand, gun combat. There's some gory deaths in this. But what's really interesting about it is, even when the action ramps up, and if you were to look at the action in isolation, you kind of get that yeah sense to it, but the tone is still very somber. I really gotta chalk that up to the music. The music that is laid in, especially during the action scenes, just keeps you in the philosophical mindset even as you're watching bullets flying, especially in the climax of the movie. The music used during the climax, which is a piece I believe called Floating Museum, is one of my favorite pieces of music written for the screen. And the way it offsets and counterpoints what you're watching, it's so not the kind of music you would expect, but it's perfect for what the film has been building to up to this point. Now obviously I've just kind of been gushing the whole time up to this. Do I have anything to complain about? Not really. There's a couple of nitpicks. The first is, if you're gonna watch this as an American or as an English speaker, you really need to watch it with the subtitles, because the dub sucks. And you need to realize, it takes a lot for me to recommend watching with the subtitles on an animated film. Because when it comes to live action, don't watch the dub. They're trying to recreate, not only do the lips not match up, but an actor in a booth with just a microphone is trying to recreate what the actor live on the set felt and brought to the camera, and that's just not the same. But when you're dealing with animation, the original Japanese actor was just a guy in a booth, so you can have an English voiceover actor who's just a guy in a booth give a good, proper voiceover. The major fall down is the woman who they got to do Major Motoko Kusanagi, and she's just bad, especially when she has to talk for a while about the philosophical concepts. It just doesn't work. Now, that may end up being a turnoff for some people that I'm going to recommend watching with subtitles because that is distracting. But I think it gets away with it in this film because when they do more talking, tends to be quieter, toned down scenes. But, the more action-oriented scenes tends to just be the action. There's not a lot of talking going on. So I think it works watching it with the subtitles. And I suppose the other thing is you just got to be in the right headspace. This is a more philosophical piece. It's got a lot of slower paced moments. It's still an action movie and it's got great action set pieces and it does build to, like I said, a phenomenal climax that I love. But this is not a roller coaster of a movie. So if that's what you go in expecting, you're going to come away disappointed and probably annoyed. So those are my general feelings on the film, and you can consider that my spoiler-free review. Getting into Ghost in the Shell 2.0, I am going to more freely talk about spoilers, because I have to talk about some of the differences between the films. Before I get into the spoilers, I will say, Ghost in the Shell 2.0, don't bother. It is like Star Wars special editions. There's all these changes that were made for either no reason or a reason that I don't think is enough to justify it. And they didn't even take the opportunity to redo a new American dub on it. Skip it, watch the original. Getting into some of the specifics, there's a lot of changes that went on and some are just odd. Like, most of the computer stuff in the original one had a green tint to it, which is kind of typical. Certainly at this point, it's become almost a cliche. They've redone that to an orange tint, and it's not like that wrecks anything, but that's just an odd thing to change, especially because it changes the feel of it. Green is a very cool color. Orange is a warm color. That fundamentally changes your emotional reaction to what you're seeing. Some other things they did, a lot of vehicles that were hand-drawn animation have been replaced with CGI vehicles, and it's okay, it's not an improvement, but it's not horribly integrated. There are a couple of scenes, though, where Major Kusanagi herself is replaced with a CGI character, and I don't understand why. At all. The opening intro, they do this, and then at the midpoint of the movie where she's diving and coming out of the water, they do it again, and it looks wrong. Especially since the rest of the movie, she doesn't look like that. The one they insert in the middle especially, it looks like, you know what it looks like? It looks like a cutscene out of a video game. It just looks wrong, it's jarring, and there was nothing wrong with the original animation. There was one change that they did that I found kind of interesting, but I still don't like it. And that was to the voice actor doing the puppet master. They went from a male voice actor in the original to a female voice actor in Ghost in the Shell 2.0. And I'm not entirely sure why they did this. I have a theory though. The only reason that I can think that you would do this would be if there was some concern or some reaction that having it be a male voice meant that there was some sort of implied sexual connection between the puppet master and the major. And I suppose, especially with what happens at the end, which is that they sort of merge and this new being emerges as a result of that. And the puppet master himself even says, you will give birth to a new intelligence. I suppose that if you were inclined to, you could read that as, okay, they just took an independent, powerful, yes, at times visually sexualized woman, but a woman who was very much in control, and they have basically now said what makes you important is your ability to give birth and be a mother. And so that could be seen as diminishing of her character. Now, I've never read the movie that way up to this point. I only thought of that because I was trying to think of why they would change the voice actor from a man to a woman, and I came up with that idea. But I've seen this movie a lot of times, and I never read it that way. Again, I can see how you can, but I would argue against that even really being the case in the first place. But if that's what they were trying to fix, that kind of caused some other problems. The first is that one of the things I really loved about that voice work in the original was seeing that woman android body and hearing that deep male voice come out of it. It's disturbing, it's off-putting, it's creepy, and it works. And then more logistically, towards the very end, right before they merge, when the major and the puppet master are communicating, and it's just basically just their brains talking to each other, so neither character's mouth is moving and you're just hearing the voices. Instead of hearing a male voice and a female voice, you're now hearing two female voices. And I'm not going to say that I literally could not tell the difference. There was slight differences, but they were similar enough that I had a much harder time, and it took me a second to figure out who was talking at a number of points, and that's distracting. So yeah, like I said, Ghost in the Shell 2.0, skip it, no point. But Ghost in the Shell, definitely see it if you haven't. If you like anime at all and you haven't seen this, get off your butt. And actually, you may be interested to check it out anyway because it is being remade as an American action movie. Scarlett Johansson's gonna be the Major. I do have my eye on this and I have mixed feelings the more that I hear about it, but I'm hopeful. We'll see. In any case, those are my thoughts on both Ghost in the Shell and Ghost in the Shell 2.0. Have you seen one or either version of this movie? What were your thoughts on them? What was your preference? Did you like the changes? Were you like me? Did you hate them? Whatever your thoughts about either version or this movie as a whole or the remake or whatever, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. Please feel free to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at Council of Geeks. Check out the Council of Geeks podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. And as for me, I'll be back as soon as I can get my next fix.